Hello, Americans, and dear Palestine, and Israel, and Russia, and Ukraine. Before our founders were born, the suburbs had been designed. They had been designed a part of a torture method, extortion method, and we know a slavery method against each. But we don't know that to an extent. Where that is known about, they have it replaced with all kinds of published books that are exploiting how our founders didn't have free speech, that had to hide their actual identities, individually grouped them together, or they would have been censored. To understand this, we have to understand American history as we were taught by our founders behind James Madison, to explain it that way, who then went and got George Washington to agree to use their plan, the plan of James Madison, to go counter-extort at 13 locations in more than 13 colonies, themselves divided worse than modern countries are divided. The intelligence community recorded themselves consciously pretending others simultaneously, knowingly, pretending to believe things, and credibility to uses of isms and ists and descriptions of names of others, and of the validity of sequence shifts, for example, on a mass scale, the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and nature, going into courts with names from suburbs, again, designed before our founders were born, with slavery entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies. Then all of a sudden, everyone was forced to break the syntactical rules, the nature rules, the sense and sensibilities, the debates and nature debate regarding things like manners, black people. They had none, but in other words, this breaching method hurt everyone simultaneously and helped them as collusion to keep consciously the positive and negatives that it was causing and that nature was demonstrating it was causing, to keep that functional by having assigned everyone to blame other things, others, or self. Where nature, in other words, consciousness and logic and science shows there are things, the breaching method is the subject, is the only thing we should say. It's all about that. Because more and more, hyper additionally, all kinds of apparent motivations, natures, needs, interests, even the real ones, they are part with those uses of truths for lies, and to screen the complete lies that go with them. And simultaneously, how they were shown they already recorded themselves speaking about truths and lies as liars, as collusion /s, and with the fake motivations for it. Forgiveness is to show that. Forgiveness is to have mandated law followed. The courts on a mass scale, they've been making knave reactions because they have this stream of people going into courts every day. Many pray at countries A through Z. And when there is not, when they have no problems with those types of crimes, as we know they have been addressed. So we left out the predicate acts with facts method /s. And the plural part is through our own. And was and is manifest where and how. At our own, I mean our human species body of individual bodies. All group differences, plural, are in demonstration of the hyper simultaneous, the hyper singular that comes with this to an extent we could discern. But any part of what is true always, not denying the slightest detail, not devaluing or changing, value changed, realizing or not what the value of what came first as itself. It uses the order of how things progress naturally, a part of how it answers our questions. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, to know that the fact that just the fact that something was published doesn't give it credibility. For example, regarding this and regarding the nature of debate, with the premises used, so you guys are leaving out the value of sequence, truth. You guys are leaving out the value of the hyper-evidential. Black pupils, how many of us have wanted perfectly and simultaneously to speak to the human species body, that we could discern the quote experts, unquote, on the black and white as forced by the breaching method? That's the answer. Who assigned those? What assigned those? Oh, this country did that role. Say this is the foundation of suits and ties and counters as collusions against themselves because they're defending the use of difference, use of their own name or other people's names as systems tactical ulterior from the one that is hyper native pure. That shows us the only increasing value of Native Americans. Rights because they're hyper invisible but still discernible. But they're discernibly physically, invisibly but still discernibly, and further hyper invisibly but still discernibly, multi-front, prevented sickly distinctly from our own, but also sickly non-distinctly. But rather than the same way between countries A through Z, all groupings, even if countries A through Z agree to use the same plan, but not be led by how nature tells us to value, like the seasons, that part of the future we know about now. And to value that part of the future we don't know about now, that is connected to it, to what we do know about as another part of itself. That identity of forever nature, which is these 5 distinct identities of time. The value of truth for the smallest finite detail. Now, this shows there was a breaching method, for example, having been sustained against Native Americans A through Z, until it was against themselves syntactically, when they're not against themselves, but there's only so much time. And there's the nature of the debate with the groupthink. A whole bunch of people using isms at the same time. Prepare the mind, species body coach. How are you? So this is this human species body in Palestine right now, in America and in Russia, for example, 2 nations that could traverse the earth, let alone together. Let alone America, Russia, China, India, and Europe, and Africa, all with the same plan and checking and method /S of checking. We don't see evolution, fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere at ground locations, because the means to it better than free. Set, revalue, refresh rates. Like a newspaper used to be 10 cents, for example. In other words, all these things are under control where it is not. The only reason is not because one of the main reasons is because we have left out the breaching method. But the main reason is because we have left out the identity of hyperrelativity. See, having a relativity theory on relativity, this force tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be self-valued rolls with itself, our own selves, as countries A through Z, as locations, areas, and states, everywhere the human species body is. So we're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged. To do that, we have to understand how there's a breaching method that was entrenched and that was checking the sense and sensibilities of everyone. It was running an algorithm /S through everyone. It was use /S of the database relationships and relativity of everyone to all locations /S. Crazy laws. witch trials. So I don't know who that is. Andre and Andre. So, but we can make hyper peace, and there's a difference between hyper peace and peace. For example, nature shows us this because nature shows us that there can be criminal, insidious natures of peace, and nature shows us with per science, nature being the identity of the hyper simultaneous, its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that. It shows us there are distinct bodies, species, bodies. There are birds, fish, and they have individuals of the individual species body. And they have grouped differences, plural, but it's difference slash S, being the difference of the hyperrelativity. So there is relativity that is hypernative pure. And it is showing us this, for example, it is the cipher showing us that the difference between president slash chief, because the Native Americans are part of our founders too, in America. And in Russia too, the suburbs were designed for that role method. It was against the law before our founders were born to speak about building infrastructure any other way. The suburbs were designed to be a landscape theater, not realizing where and how the breaching method assigned everyone in need food, resources, and names from other locations, tactical ulterior from how nature employed us to understand how we are a united, independent, inseparable species body, while simultaneously we are independent, unjuxtaposable, because it is showing us how it is we are hyper additional nature. It is showing us how the identity of the hyper simultaneous, its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that are equally increasingly valued relative to any subject we make, individually grouped and together. But also, nature's identity shows us, the identity of hyperrelativity shows us. No, I lost my train of thought. But in other words, this is hyper archaeological evidences. They have those crazy laws and torture methods and slavery methods to make before cars and all that, before America's founders were even born. These homes and suburbs. Now look how it knew the breaching rolls with the breaching method knew at countries A through Z the phenomenon of how cities would be built, but through our own, while being used remotely, not fathoming because of how long it had sustained roles, not fathoming, and blaming the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. For example, itself, the breaching method. Nature shows us that we can agree at countries A through Z, a whole bunch of ways, to call the breaching method a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. And to recruit our names, including all business names, to be like, in other words, like either admit it and seek release too, or anyone who tries to deny it. Black people, we have black people's rights of eyes to discern this. It is more probable to convict, for example, with theories, to theorize, let alone to convict. That when there's a famous phrase in American history that said, "Don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes." Because again, to understand this, and to have that not debate regarding what cipher might be involved with it. Why would cipher have to be involved? Because there were syntactical possessions at people at locations A through Z. regardless which trials were about, who made them up, or what, they were in the past and they are actively now being used to measure and maintain roles, blaming other things, others, ourselves, and tactically delusions wrought in defenses of readings of statutes and of precedents, in defenses of reading how to describe the cases that come before courts, how they were seating juries, how to measure intelligence. See, there are all kinds of fact-trivial nature, predicate acts with facts, methods, roles, and natures way worse than the crimes that this breaching method knew would force, trick, hurt, persuade, just make up anyway. Increasingly, even when from the slightest crimes to the worst crimes, they can't leave it the way it is. They have to put fake things in databases. Sometimes it's the people from off them. So the FBI and state police, Weathersfield Police, other police departments in Connecticut, they have rules with federal evidences, crime methods on Harper campuses. All the campuses, including fire and medical, but on off all sides of criminal and civil cases too. On off all locations /S. Predicate acts with facts, methods, and cover-ups, because this is how they were used remotely, shown since they were kids, needing to hide things per use /S of other being and having been communicated for our founders than they communicated to have communicated for themselves, like James Madison, principally, and George Washington. We're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. So in Russia and in America, we have suburbs that look almost exactly the same because they were designed tactically to nature to cause negative value nature progressions, acts in nature that wouldn't be realized until they were self-valued because they were given the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts in nature is to self-value roles with systems tactical ulterior from one to one that can't help being anyone. A through Z. It's assignment of A through Z hypernative. So Native Americans, so chiefs, including not just president /chief. Chief is a name given to fire chiefs, police chiefs. See, we have a campuses system. We have a republic that has stayed criminally foreign influence in semi-ancient times. And while it is measured and maintained that is self-valued, while it is simultaneously denied, obfuscated, and screened, so way worse for the breaching method. We can make a hyperstability. Instantly, quicker and quicker, we alleviate on these huge power, capable of being actual power /might simultaneously, both positive onto itself. And we're checking with the third way there as the /. This is pantheism /hyperpantheism. This is hyperintelligence. About a decade ago, I wrote a counter script because of relative to the theater that we could discern. Also, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not police, not court, but we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and we could be the species coach together because we have to do. I mean, in other words, to make evolution's fruits and gifts and means out of nowhere. Per its system has means to do this, including in some ways, especially regarding where and how we are quality as fact-achieving nature. on a mass scale at countries A through Z, locations, areas, states. They go into courts, they don't have clear charges. They have roles with names from New York, New York justice through for decades, longer than I've been alive, with their roles with Wethersfield, Connecticut intelligence, intercities in Connecticut. They've been putting fake transcripts in databases. Forgiveness is not to put them and everyone in jail. In other words, they have rules furthering the overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and uses of how they have like acting professors in unmarked police forms, and the identity of either you defend the police or don't, as collusion /S with criminal insidiousness natures of identity uses, of difference uses, black people. When did one identity of the law speak properly for the law of black scenes? New Yorkers here. See, we have to show them how to use passions and emotions, not to leave out and force equality of fact, cheap in nature, that can't afford to discern the value of sequence shifts. So we have to show the difference between making and checking to make sure it is and stays hyper positive out of negative. There's a difference between making criminal insidiousness natures of positive out of negative, as the breaching method employed only allowed, and it sustained that. So it sustained what? Hyper additional from those motivations, and from those realities, using everyone as the marionette with those things. In other words, sick people involved also. It's sometimes, in other words, the difference of the guilt. It's also the prisons. They're supposed to be speaking about corrections. They're correcting people that commit crimes. They're not even clear about the crimes. They're fishing because there are self-valued roles with locations, areas, and states, just like there were with the colonies. Blaming other things, others, or blaming self for things the breaching method was the cause of. Otherwise, that body would be censored, even if that body was a majority of people, even if that body was everyone. But unless we look at it this way, and so we don't need to move with theory. See, when they speak on legal theory, that's one of the things. When they speak on relativity theory, there is an identity of hyperrelativity. English was revealed to teach this. The other ancient languages were revealed to teach this before the sciences became tactically, criminally foreign influence. / hyper-tactically. Again, because it was through ourselves. It was through ourselves. Self-valued role with what they didn't want. 100 as the design of suburbs. 100 years before our founders were born. It rushes into the same trap, suits and ties, counters. People speaking about the intelligence community recorded themselves consciously, knowingly, speaking about the and caring about, pretending to care about economic values and physics with it, value treatments, pretending not to realize the value of their predicate acts, their wire crime acts and methods, their roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders on a mass scale. Yeah! Who just believes. In other words, so I was one of the names. On off the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center towers and the World Trade Center attack contacts in the spots next to it. And on off the World Trade Center with names involved. And since with the investigators of it, including foreign and domestic military roles of World Trade Center predicate acts, and with identity theft, fraud, slanders, mass federal evidence crime methods, fake motivations planted too and screening, lying about the motivations of people they brought their names up. I never saw Eric Oliveri out in my life. I don't even know where they live. And Eric Olson, Matt Olson, and other people with the name Kalal and tied to him. With the Terry and the switching names, Terry Lewis and Terry Cleese. With the name Lewis, I don't even know their names, but the name Lewis involved too. Identity theft, fraud, slander, roles of wire crimes of Wethersfield police, also predicate acts, switching names, forging names. Time collusion with people with overt criminal enterprises, private ones with threats, and further with the principal child offender I caught them with. Phil Kalal and other people. Also, they have intercultural rackets. They should fear God and make sure you got them on paper, one name and sequence with the courts, because these are people with New York courts involved with Connecticut courts. Planting evidence is also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants. Thaddeus Grabowski also as one of the ones involved with Mike DeMay and Anthony Yagman with child offenders, leaders of kids, including sexual and medical and judicial and police families. Now these are also with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. You should fear God, because their neighbors. Also, Police Chief Cintron is one of the names involved with Bravo Network, and all along Route 3 and conjunctions and adjacents to it. Their roles with the World Trade Center predicate acts, interstates, and these are people with Washington, D.C., who also have roles of predicate acts with the teachers, are the ones involved with the wire crimes, with the police switching names, forging names, little cowards, with the courts too, and with former director of the FBI and his co-defendants, people associated with his depositions, and the courts that brought themselves into it because of their roles with their family members, criminally foreign influence. Where they had to make it look like after the fact they lie about, they go, I didn't know. In other words, they got themselves involved with a pro se. I mean, with a pro se civil RICO lawsuit against former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. See, most people who would put a RICO lawsuit against a former director of the FBI and co-defendants of their lawyer also is involved with the spots next to them, as the names involved with predicate acts against me and others, and as the names involved further with the principal child offenders campus, with more in the past and then now till still. And the news is at corners of streets planting evidences with them. They have roles with home break-ins and remote uses of the identities of the military, foreign and domestic. They should fear God to pretend that justice spoke at location A through Z, black people. In other words, see, there's a certain type of victim, we have to have forgiveness for them. And we have to force that they have forgiveness for us simultaneously. There are these three value progressions as the extent that we could discern that of which with each subject individually grouped it together, which is true always. Not denying it's like a sequence here. It's like detail left out. As itself, trying to discern what is what is hyper simultaneous and positive to itself. Because every identity has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. Nature shows us that value has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. See, the breaching method employed that for torture, apart with that slavery method, that human factory nature breaking method, didn't it? It had made everyone pretend other too, had their sense and sensibilities, used Jane Austen's phrase, other than they could afford to have discerned. Now, one has learned, but they'll jump forward and jump into people's conversations and change it from what is capable of countering and overcoming the predicate acts with facts methods and the acts themselves. So the news is recorded, confessing, demonstrating, recorded, confirmed. They have wire and mail crime methods. You can't call them with police that pretend they had conversations with me as a kid. He has had life progressions increasingly tied to murders and all things. Since, too. Same one switching names, forging names. Retired police chiefs with this police chief Sintron, and one with the same house, slash S, involved with them. Afghan leaders, Pakistani, Italian. You guys need to get out of psychiatry and add the law at the same time. And you guys are going to speak for corrections. You guys can't even be clear. You guys are going to speak about names. You guys are going to use the. You guys are going to use the name Hitler or Mussolini or presidents. Or you guys only have James Madison right. You don't have the founders behind him. You guys want to blame on a tea tax while slavery was entrenched north or south. Now north and south, wake up because it's time. Knock, knock. 'Tis time. Who disbelieves? Knock, knock. Romulus is home. See, Romulus serves a function for this republic. So these are names off election locations. So the former director of the FBI also has roles on off Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College with intelligence families and people associated with that live next to them. Or if it's undercover, pretending to be a regular person, or what it is. Because they have roles with the court's family members, planting evidences with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and names on all sides of the criminal World Trade Center attack. Leading up to the attack, in the attack context and sense, like the name Scalora, involved with the West Hartford locations and New Britain locations, that leaders of the kids, and were court expressed, demonstrated, confirmed by the military, foreign and domestic, to me, involved with them with predicate acts with facts at those locations. They're putting fake audio and video transcripts on campuses. In other words, increasingly they have it sickly distinctly against each age. And then there's little trends in there that they will get caught. So they keep it like, in other words, they say, well, they tell the kids about what it was for the other people in that grade. And that, in other words, it's a vertical and horizontal method. And it's not hurting or helping anyone the way it appears. In other words, this is where and how you guys can be motivated to even jump in the conversation and change what people are saying. Fake conversations at the same time. WFSB is in the process of confessing, demonstrating, recording, confirming to me that they put people in fake conversations with themselves and with others to prevent them free speech, and while they have full roles with federal evidences, crimes, rackets. Way worse than what they put little kids and adults in jail for. They have all kinds of rackets with their bringing up charges and to hide life progressions. They've been stacking fake things and change things into databases. Never stop doing it. Black pupils. They have the audacity. See, they need you guys to defend calling it racism or prejudice. It was a breaching method, and it is one. And so there's a quality of fact-checking nature that's being forced. And you guys want to pretend things are debatable that are not. And how you get away with it is per your valuing, just because something's published. Get on paper, one name and sequence. Focus at the hyper-evidential. See, the other things, they're pretending, they have roles with documents racketing. Oh, I don't see any evidence, physical, because they're putting fake evidences. That's evidences. They're switching names. That's hyper-evidential. So there's evidences, rackets. And in New York should say, sorry. If you want forgiveness and have this conversation, get them on paper, one name and sequence. Because I want to get to you the foreign bodies that are involved with the same one. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names next to the body dumping spots. In other words, a whole bunch of people tied to mayors involved with medicines racketeering spots where they're putting fake conversations while their tactically delusions raw. Joseph Dennis has roles with them too, with investigators, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed him, involved with them with predicate acts with facts. Also a Joe Aiello and people associated with him. involved with home break-ins and crimes with guns and federal evidences crimes with mayors and election spots and child sex offenders, leaders of the kids, proven and further reported. These are sick people along Franklin Avenue with the FBI involved with the foreign and domestic. Hey, get them on paper, one name and sequence. How many times I got to beg you? Say sorry to Judge Napolitano, too. Or with him, I don't know what. Get them on paper with the Connecticut Interbranch and Weathersfield Police, switching 14 names. And thank God for the good ones who confess that. Now, I'll show you what to do with these retired police chiefs. With I don't know the other one's name, with the one associated with the same house, with the